Hi, Rich here. Welcome to this Bible study. Today we're going to study the story about a young boy who's demon-possessed, but it raises a much better and bigger question for you and for me about our faith and about doubts. Mark chapter 9, verses 14 to 29, I've entitled this story, Help Me Overcome My Doubts. Let's begin reading. When they returned to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd surrounding them, and some of the teachers of the law were arguing with them. Pause for a moment. Who is they? Peter, James, and John, along with the Lord Jesus Christ. Remember last time in the story? They had gone up a high mountain, and there Jesus was transformed in front of their eyes. Now they've come back down the mountain. What do these four find? A crowd gathered around some religious teachers of the law, and they're arguing with the other disciples. When the crowd saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with awe, and they ran to greet him. What is all this arguing about? Jesus asked. One of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, Teacher, I brought my son so you could heal him. He's possessed with an evil spirit. So here we see the problem, an evil spirit. What is this spirit doing to the boy? Let's read. It won't let him talk. And whenever this spirit seizes him, it throws him violently to the ground. Then he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So 5 factors we see of how this demon is affecting the boy. Very sad case. When demons enter a person, they show up, they manifest, they do things. Here, this demon has entered this little boy, and we see in the Bible that children seem to be susceptible to demon possession. If you're casting demons out, you can talk to them, and they will tell you often how they came into the person. However, they lie, and so can their words be trusted? But here, there's no sort of information like that. We just see that the boy has a spirit. So I asked your disciples to cast out the spirit, but they could not do it. So the man had brought this boy to Jesus. Jesus wasn't there. He was up the mountain. So he asked the disciples to do the job, and they cannot do it. This is an interesting fact, because only recently the disciples had been given the power by Jesus to cast out demons. So why can't they do it at this point? Well, the next part tells us. Jesus said to them, You faithless people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So they brought the boy. This is one of the few times we hear in Jesus' tone that he's quite frustrated with the people. But I think the people here he's really referring to are his own disciples. How long will he be with them? How long will it be until they pick up on having faith? You see, he had given them the authority over demons, but they seem to not be really exercising faith. Maybe they're more impressed with just the power that was given, relying on their own strength instead of on God's strength and trusting in Jesus to do the miracle. Anyway, maybe that's what it is, but Jesus is a little bit bothered with their lack of faith. We're going to learn something interesting about this spirit later as well. But when the evil spirit saw Jesus, it threw the child into a convulsion, and he fell to the ground, writhing and foaming at the mouth. So here this demon sees Jesus. It's looking through the eyes of the boy and sees the Lord Jesus Christ. How long has this been happening? Jesus asked the boy's father. He replied, since he was a little boy, the spirit often throws him into the fire or into water, trying to kill him. Very interesting with the Lord. He's not out of control. He doesn't become all bothered. He doesn't rush over to the boy and try to heal him. He steps back a moment, looks almost like a doctor would do, analyzes. You know how when you go to the doctor, he'll ask you, how long has your knee been hurting you? Or how long have you had this cough? Jesus is just asking, how long's this gone on? The demon's doing its little show in the boy and manifesting. And we learn from this that the boy has had this spirit since he was little. So he's had this spirit for some time. We don't know how old the boy is when this story is taking place and how little he was when he received the spirit, this demon. But it's been a while. And this is where part of the problem now comes in. His father's very frustrated. He's very distraught. He's upset. It's his son. When you have children, you have small children, and they're sick, it can be very disturbing and very upsetting. This man is very aware that there's a demon inside of his son. It's got control of his son. He wants it out, but has no power over this demon. It's a particularly strong demon inside this boy. So really troubled. And he says this to Jesus. Now, this is where we get to the real heart of the story. Pay attention here. Have mercy on us and help us if you can. What do you mean if I can? Asked Jesus. Anything is possible if a person believes. The father instantly cried out, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Notice the man's question, help us if you can. He's asking Jesus if you are able. If I am able, Jesus says. Pay attention to this. Very different question from, are you willing? We read in the Gospels of different stories. People come to Jesus, if you're willing, Lord, you can do this. And the Lord says, I'm willing. And the person's healed. This is not a question, Lord, are you willing? This is a question, Lord, are you able? If you can. Now, maybe this man was one of these kind of people who had run around and tried many things. Maybe he had been to a shaman, somebody who reads livers, somebody who casts spells and believes that they have power over these things. Maybe he had been to see some mystics who had tried some other practices. And maybe he had tried wearing charms or these sorts of things. We don't know. But is this man, I'm asking a question, is he only coming to Jesus as another perhaps way to solve his problem? He's heard about Jesus, he's tried other means, and maybe Jesus, anything that will work, whatever the pragmatic answer is, help me overcome this problem. Is that his problem? In any case, what we can say is that he's stuck. He's really stuck. And Jesus tells him anything is possible if a person believes. This is a critical part of the story. Think about this. Many people believe in God, but this is not the question here, do you believe in God? In fact, Christians are often accused of having a blind faith. It means we have an unreasonable faith. We don't use our minds anymore. We just trust and believe and jump off the cliff of faith, and it's really a silly decision. However, I believe that everybody has blind faith. Let me ask you a question. Do you know everything? But do you believe things? Do you know everything? No, you don't know everything. But do you believe things? Yes, you believe things. So it means you, like me, like everybody on the earth, none of us knows everything, but all of us believe things. That means that long before all the evidence is in, and we've had a chance to consider all the alternatives, we make up our minds and we make a choice about what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's false. So all of us, without knowing everything, believe, therefore all of us have a blind faith. You'll meet young men and women at the age of 20, 22, 25, very young, but very strongly convinced that there is a God, or there isn't a God. And yet they're young. They have many more years to go to consider more evidence, but they make up their mind early. Even old people, if those young people lived to be 80 years of age, would they know everything? No, they wouldn't, but they would still believe things. So all of us, all over the world, believe things, are true and false, but we don't know everything. Now, what I'm trying to say is that everybody has a blind faith. Everybody has blinders on. Nobody knows everything. But this is asking a better question than that. Anything is possible. The question here isn't, do you believe there is a God? And the man says, yeah. Jesus is not asking him, do you believe that I'm the Messiah of Israel? And the man says, yeah, I believe these truths to be true. This information is correct. That's not what he's asking the man. He says, anything is possible if a person believes. You see, Jesus is asking the central question of faith. What are you trusting God to do for you? Not do you believe there's a God. What are you trusting him to do for you? The father instantly cried, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Here is the central issue. Help me overcome my doubts. How do we move from a place of doubting that God is able to believing that God is able? Because if we can't take that step, then we're not going to be able to have faith and trust God to do things. Now, I believe personally that doubt is a really central part of faith. What do I mean? I mean that doubt is often a starting point that pushes us to faith. Doubt usually arises when we see how impossible circumstances are. And we reflect on experiences of life, and we begin to come to terms with how difficult and impossible something is to actually be pulled off, to be accomplished. But from doubt stems faith, because when we see that something is impossible, it begins to move us to the God who does the impossible, and to cry out to him, not to believe that we can do anything, but that he can do everything. And he takes impossibilities and does things. He loves impossible situations. Doubt is often the doorway that brings us to realize how impossible something is and to cry out to God to do something amazing. Let me show you what I mean. Jesus, for many of us, is really the God who can do anything. He's big, but problems arise. For this man, he had a son who had a demon, and that problem was a great problem. It had gone on for years. Like that man, many of us, our problems are big and long-term, and as they continue on and continue on, we feel like the problem is so big. And really, like this illustration, Jesus is there, but he's behind the problem. The problem is in the way. It's blocking the way that we really can't see Jesus. And what needs to happen is that we need to bring Jesus back up to the front. We need to get our eyes on him and let that problem become smaller and smaller. Well, how do we do that? We do that by saying this one saying that God is able. You see, faith, there's my little man of faith. Faith has an expression. God is able. That's the expression of faith. That's the statement of faith. God is able. No matter what the problem is, God is able. This is the way to begin to overcome. So for you, for me, whenever we find ourselves in impossible situations, we have to just say, God is able. Let me share with you one story, because I've had 3 or 4 stories in the last few years that I thought were completely impossible, but God did something. I arrived in the States about 16 months ago. My mom was in very poor health. She went into the hospital, and I believed it was going to be the end for her. I didn't see any way that she'd come back. I really thought it was over for her. I believed God could do anything. I believed that God could heal her, but I looked at her and thought, this is the end. It's over. I prayed. Others prayed. And little by little, God raised her up and gave her strength. She's taken no more chemotherapy, but you know what? God has continued to strengthen her throughout the months. He's performed a miracle. He took a situation that in my mind was completely impossible. And because I turned to God and I said, God, you are able. If it's your time to take her, then it's her time, but you are able to heal her. And God did it. So believing that God is able is the door to seeing him do things. God can do anything for the one who believes, for the one who says, Lord, you are able. I don't have the answer, but you have the answer. Let's continue the story. When Jesus saw that the crowd of onlookers was growing, he rebuked the evil spirit. Pause here for just a second. If you look online, you can find a lot of video films of people in church services or meetings where they're casting out demons. I'm not going to say it's wrong or right. I'm not going to say those people have demons or don't have demons, that it's a sham, that it's real. It's not my point. My point is this. When Jesus saw the crowd, he quickly takes care of the problem. He rebukes the demon before the crowd runs around. He doesn't say, okay, everybody gather around, bring the cameras, focus on this for just a minute so everybody can see the power of God. He quickly heals the demon. Listen, you spirit that makes this boy unable to hear and speak, he said, I command you to come out of this child and never enter him again. Then the spirit screamed and threw the boy into another violent convulsion and left him. Amazing miracle, the boy is healed. The boy appeared to be dead. A murmur ran through the crowd as people said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and helped him to his feet, and he stood up. So the boy is not dead. Afterward, when Jesus was alone in the house with his disciples, they asked him, why couldn't we cast out the evil spirit? Jesus replied, this kind can be cast out only by prayer. Now, some versions of the Bible say prayer and fasting. But in any case, it means that there are some demons that take a lot of prayer. I think this is really critical. All demons are not the same. Some seem to be particularly ornery, difficult to pull out, to cast out. All of us face a spiritual warfare. If our eyes could be opened and we could see into the spirit world around us, we would see a world filled, animated, completely active with angels, holy angels, and fallen demons, fallen spirits. Behind this world, although we have a tremendously evil nature within us that's capable of doing great sin, much sin is inspired by Satan's push. Read the Bible. And Satan also loves to live inside of people and inhabit them and fill them with demons, fill them with his power and trouble their lives. Every demon is not the same. Every problem is not the same. You see, some problems take a lot of prayer. Some problems take a little prayer. Some demons take a lot of prayer. Some demons take a little prayer. I think the disciples had a problem here. They were trying the one-size-fits-all answer. You see, there's just a certain way you pray. We've done it before this way. So here's another demon. This is the way you cast out a demon. And they tried. And they tried. And they tried. But it wasn't working. You see, one size doesn't fit all. So, important lesson from this is that when we are in prayer, no matter what the problem is for this man, a problem with a demon with his son, we need to really look to the Lord. Don't just rely on past experience of how it all worked in the past. Rely on the Lord. And our doubts, how do we overcome our doubts? It's by learning that simple phrase that God is able. We can trust God to do the impossible. And the reason you may be facing doubts is because God is bringing you to a place of desperation to see how impossible the circumstances are so that you can move beyond the doubts and you can move to faith and you can watch God do the impossible in your life. Listen, I hope this has been a blessing to you. I hope this has helped you. This is an amazing story. It's a common thing to struggle with doubts, but it's also a common thing to move beyond those doubts and see that God is able to do the impossible. Be blessed.